All right, welcome to episode 7 of the Dependable Dad podcast. I actually recorded an entire episode, went through the whole thing, and realized that the sound didn't work. So I am hoping beyond hope that this one works and the sound works on this, and you're able to hear this episode. Otherwise, I am going to have to do it again. And so that has been a little bit of the challenge. So through the month of December and everything like that, that has been the challenge. So excited to be back and start bringing you hopefully weekly episodes again in 2023. Um, Today I want to tell a story. Um, so today I want to tell a story about the time that I almost quit training. So I was a high school math teacher for 5 years. That was what I always wanted to be. If you've ever seen Boy Meets World, the 90s sitcom, I was convinced that I was going to be Mr. Feeney. I had teachers that impacted me to that level when I was in high school and middle school, and I was convinced that I was going to change the world one student at a time. Don't ask me. That's the 20-year-old Jeff believed that I could do that. And to some degree, hopefully I did. But I got into teaching and I was a high school teacher for 5 years and liked a lot of things about it, but it never quite felt like this is my forever, which is what I thought it would be. I thought I would start teaching and that would be what I did for 40 years. But realized that teaching wasn't necessarily going to be what I did forever. And so I spent a lot of time my last couple of years teaching, thinking about what I might want to do more of. And while I was teaching, I was also a football coach. I coached football even longer than I taught. And I loved coaching. I loved the dynamics with the kids and the problem solving aspect and the physical aspect of it. I played sports all through high school. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And so there was something to the coaching piece of it. And on that same journey, along that same time frame, was when I was really starting to get into fitness on my own personally. And so I had started to help some other people with their training and started to explore how can I marry these together, and got into training. And so I left teaching and was doing something else, running a business, a photo booth business for weddings and things like that, and then training as well, and was going relatively well. And I was excited about the change, and it felt like the right decision, and all of that was going in that direction. And I felt pretty confident in all of that. And then March of 2020, as everybody did, COVID hit the world, and the path that I had gone down started to look like it was really, really dumb move, because I left one of the few professions that didn't get downsized, that is education, one of the few places that really wasn't. I mean, obviously you were affected because, my wife is still a teacher, remote learning and all of that type of stuff was plenty of challenges, but from a financial perspective, teachers were still getting paid. Trainers, however, were not. Gyms closed, and the events industry, which was my other source of income, also shut down in this totally unforeseen circumstances. And this was in March, and my oldest son, was born at the beginning of April of 2020. So we were about 3 or 4 weeks before my son was born, and all of a sudden it looked fairly grim, and it was a little scary for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But it was a moment where I was like, did I make a horrible mistake in doing this? And had to go on unemployment for a period of time and all kinds of things that was fairly unnerving, and spent a lot of time thinking about, should I pivot, go do some other things that I had explored? And my son was born. That was even more of, I don't want to call it like pressure, but it was like where I have to provide and be present for my son. But it was during that sweet time where could have never anticipated this, where the world is shut down and gyms aren't open and I'm not really working, and my son is born. And it was certainly not the way that we anticipated bringing our son in the world, where my parents and my wife's parents are meeting him through glass doors. Nobody could come visit us in the hospital. We're wearing masks in the hospital when we first interact with him. all kinds of crazy things happening. It was certainly not how we anticipated it going. But at the same time, it was just a really sweet time because I could have never I was home for 9 weeks from when my son was born at the beginning of April till when gyms opened again at the beginning of June. I had 9 weeks home with my wife and my newborn son, which was an incredible blessing because never would have that's not heard of in the United States to have 9 weeks paternity leave. Like, that just doesn't exist. Um, and then during that time, it was just us. It was just the 3 of us. It was me, my wife, and my son, and just trying to figure it out in a world that's shut down, and the craziness that was, if you can think back to, 3 years ago, which is crazy that it's already been 3 years, how wild that was to be dealing with a newborn and uncertainty with jobs and all of these types of things was really quite scary. But it was also during that time that, when I was starting to take care of myself and realized very quickly, as I started to get back into exercise and things like that, how drastically different taking care of yourself and your health and your fitness and your nutrition is for parents, even in that very unique situation where I wasn't working and we had people bringing us groceries and meals and all of that. It was still and I had a gym in my basement. It was still a challenge for me, who had been doing it all along, to make my fitness and my health a priority during that time as a new dad. And also during that time, I started to talk with other dads, right? Because this on the internet, because this was a time when, well, we kind of expected our parents to be able to be around a little bit more, because of the circumstances they weren't able to be. And so because of that, there were a lot of things that we just would normally people would ask us or give us insight on and help on and things like that. Like, the best example is when we were in the hospital, right? The babies don't typically wear a lot of clothes; they're just swaddled up in the hospital. So we bring them home, and we don't really put them in clothes. We're just, swaddling them up. And there was a period of time where we just like literally put him in his little, snuggle thing and put a blanket, like a little swaddle over the top of him. And he's like sitting there freezing his little tuchus off. And we're FaceTiming with my parents, and they're like, why does he not have clothes on? We're like, well, he didn't have clothes on in the hospital. They're like, you dopes. But this was something we never, it was brand new parents. We just didn't know. And there's a lot of those things where we were kind of expecting a little bit of that to happen more often, where people are there and be able to give us insight and answer questions as we had them. And so I kind of went more to the internet and chatted with other dads, and realized that the same struggle that I was dealing with, even though it was going relatively well for me, was a struggle that a lot of other dads had and a lot of moms had with taking care of ourselves, because we're pouring out all the time. And it was a moment for me during that time where I had to decide, am I going to continue down the path of training and coaching and nutrition coaching and all of this that I love doing, but is far from a lock right now that this is going to be around in 6 months, and is certainly a world that's unprecedented. And I don't really feel prepared to dive into this, and grow this to the place that I feel like I need to go. Or am I going to pivot, and am I going to go to something that's maybe a little bit safer, a little bit more comfortable, something I've done before, business analytics or something like that, which I did some in college, but I wouldn't necessarily enjoy as much, or feel like is the right path for me, but it's safer and it's more comfortable. And at that time, I had, another coach reach out to me, who was a business coach for fitness coaches, and said, hey man, we talked, and he was like, hey, I can help you kind of bring this experience that you've had in person online. And it was an investment for me to invest in a coach. Um, and it was scary because that was going another step right away from safety, security, comfort, right? We had just had a newborn son. I wasn't working. I didn't have an income. Uh, my wife was home for the summer, and so we weren't getting all of that and some of the other supplemental income that we had. And it was very unsure. And then to then take a step out and say, all right, I'm going to put myself out there and invest, put up money that we didn't really have. I mean, we had it, it was in the bank, but it was a little bit sketchy to do from a strictly smart financial move, and to put it out there and to start to go down that path. And one of the first conversations I ever had with somebody online was with a dad who was just struggling to take care of himself, was feeling burnt out, and just couldn't get himself up to chase his kid around, and all these kinds of things. And it was that moment where I realized that the value of good coaching in the world that I got and I've received along the way, and that I know that there are other coaches out there, and hope, and that continue to do my best to become a good coach to help my clients. And it can't be understated, the value of that, particularly for parents, because there was a moment when I was first doing that, when I was thinking about, well, what first drove me to try to get back in shape. And for me, it was my wedding. I wanted to be in really great shape for my wedding. Um, but the stakes weren't that high there. If I don't get in great shape for my wedding, she's still going to marry me. Like, she already said yes. Like, I might not love the pictures, but it was holding my newborn son in my house by myself at 2 o'clock in the morning with nobody else there, and he's crying and I don't know what to do, that I realized the stakes for parents are so much higher. The stakes for parents are to the moon, and the responsibility is unfathomable, and the expectations of us are sky high, but the difficulty level is right there with it. Meaning, we're from when our kids wake up in the morning until they go down at night, we're on, right? We're mom, we're dad on the whole day. And our interaction with them has a lasting impression from that moment on. And so how do we interact with them? Do we have the energy to be there with them the way that we want to be? But at the same time, from when they wake up until they go to bed, there are expectations on us. There's responsibilities on us. It's a lot harder to do things like take care of yourself as a parent than it is when you don't have kids, right? I try not to do this too much because it's a little bit disappointing, but to think back to the flexibility that you had pre-kids, to just be like, oh, I didn't get my workout in during this time, I'll just do it at this time or tomorrow. I didn't go to the grocery store during this window. Well, that means that I'm going at this time. Well, that doesn't, some of those logistics just don't fly when you have kids that rely on you, and responsibilities and work and household things. And it's very easy for taking care of yourself to get slid to the back burner. And it's one of the things that, in being a parent, that I've realized the most is in taking that step of faith to get a coach, which was scary as all get out, was one of the best decisions I've made, I think, in my adult life, because in doing that, it allowed me to recognize the importance of what it is that I'm trying to do, and why I want to help parents, and why I'm going to continue to do it as long as I can, because the stakes are so high and it's scary to do it. It requires risk. It requires investment, oftentimes, that we don't feel like we have, from time, money, bandwidth to invest in ourselves. But it's a guaranteed positive return to invest in yourself, because if you invest in your health, right, all of a sudden you get more energy, right? It feel I don't have the energy to work out, but it's counterintuitive. I get more energy from working out. I spend the time to eat a little bit better. I have more time to plan with my plan my meals and play with my kids and all these things because I've prepped it ahead of time, and I'm not as stressed about it, and I'm more willing and more present with my kids, and investing what we didn't really feel like we had into me. And I'll never be able to fully thank my wife enough for this, and taking that step of faith with me to invest it in me was what allowed me to realize what could become. And it was absolutely a positive return on that investment, both from a financial perspective, absolutely, but also way beyond that. I could have gone down a very different path very quickly. It was very scary. And it took something outside to kind of help guide me onto the path to take care of what I really wanted to do and who I really wanted to be, which was a coach and to help parents take care of themselves. So I just wanted to share that story. It's a little bit of why I do what I do and why I'm still here. And I hope that maybe some of that, maybe you have COVID babies as well, and you can relate to that story, or just some of the scariness of that, and being willing to take a step of faith out and invest in yourself, from a time, money. Coaching is incredibly helpful, but investing in yourself always returns positive. So it's worth doing. It's worth taking that risk. Appreciate you listening, and I hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you next time.